I can understand someone being reticent to kind of cut their losses like this, if especially if they've been putting into something their whole life. But when you look at a chart like this, you can see that, like, I maybe if I'm 85 years old, I'm not thinking to 2060. I get that, but if you want to leave a country at all for your kids and for your grandkids, then it's something to consider. I understand it's hard to walk away from something that you put so much money into, but it would suck just to waste even more.
Well, the thing is you're not walking away from the money you've put into it. So Alberta would be entitled to the assets that it has contributed to the Canada Pension Plan. And so what we're actually doing is transferring the assets from Canada as a whole to Alberta, and Alberta only has 2.5 million contributors, 2.5 million contributors that it has to finance and fund in its own Alberta pension plan, unlike the 22 million that Canada would have to finance. And right now, it's actually Albertans that are financing retirees in Newfoundland, Labrador, in PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And, that's the part that people don't seem to realize. You're not losing anything. We're actually going to get that money back from the Canada Pension Plan. But we're going to talk here in a little bit. We don't even really need anything to do this. We could start this tomorrow from nothing, and it would still actually benefit Alberta. Now, the slide you have up right now, I put this one in because it's fascinating, because this is not a new topic of conversation. This one was done back in 2010 by Newfoundland and Labrador Employers Council. And I like to point this out because there's unseen consequences to people's actions, to government's actions, government's regulations, government's policies that nobody really understands, because it's not an instant correlation. It's not action and then consequence. Sometimes these consequences take not only years, but sometimes decades to play out. And so with this one here, Newfoundland and Labrador actually did not vote in favor of making the changes back in 1997 to refinance the CPP by increasing the contribution rates and by reducing benefits, which is what in essence happened. Here they point out some really good reasons why they did not. And the thing is it increased the employer cost and labor costs, and it reduced the demand for labor. So in essence, what happened was it increased mandatory payroll tax that detrimentally affected the payroll budgets of every business in Canada. Right? So you have to remember that every dollar that you put in, an employer has to match. Well, you're one person, but if you're an employer, let's say just a small business, and you run a little restaurant and you've got 15 employees, now you're having to match that for 15 individuals. Now combine that with the wage increases and everything else they've been doing, and that's a huge burden on a small business owner. And then they also talk here about recovering the share of the tax increase in the form of higher prices on goods and services. Well, if I'm going to increase your costs by $1 as a business owner, that dollar has to get flowed through to the consumer. So now you as a consumer are going to pay more for those goods and services. And I love this because they point out the end result, increasing CPP premiums, increased inflation. And what are we seeing today? Huge increases in inflation. Now, this is not the only reason, but it is certainly part of the reason, and results in job losses for Canadians. We're seeing in GDP per capita lower productivity per individual because of the increase in population. But you also have a federal government that's extremely hostile to the economy. For example, how many times do we refuse to send LNG now? Three countries have come to us begging for our natural resources, which would have a huge impact on increasing the productivity in Canada. And yet we have the Deputy Governor General of the Bank of Canada, Carolyn Rogers, having to go around saying we're in a productivity crisis. And we're only in a productivity crisis because we have a federal government that is completely anti-productivity. Every policy they have put out, everything they have done, in particular the Liberals, but it goes beyond that. Goes back to like the early 2000s that our productivity has been going down, but it has been really exasperated since the Liberals took control. And productivity is at an all-time low, to the point now where you even have Bank of Canada staff speaking up saying, this is a crisis.
Not to mention the last few years of this Tijuana donkey show we've had has really incentivized laziness and not working. Right? I can stay and do nothing, and the government is going to take care of me like a good daddy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the political class, and I'm going to quote the OECD again, really have said that, you know, the political class appear to have lost interest in efforts to raise workers' productivity and real wage growth. And what they've been focusing on are policies that don't work. And that's monetary policy, fiscal policy, trying to break record immigration levels. And one of the other things that they had was a national daycare policy, trying to bring more people back into the workforce. These are just lame efforts that really have those unseen consequences that take some time to foresee. But the reality is they don't work. And with the Canada Pension Plan, either you can increase the contribution rates, you can decrease the benefits, or you can decrease the number of people that are benefiting from it. And so, you know, some people bring up MAID, and well, I mean, they have this big push today, right? I mean, you're depressed. Oh, have you considered MAID? Well, the reality is, if they can actually reduce the number of people who would benefit and draw on the Canada Pension Plan, that's to their benefit.